Okay, so some stuff up front. The Shaggs are child stars. Kinda, technically. So this video will include some upsetting stuff because child stars do not have good childhoods.
Listen to some of this and it'll blow that poppy trash music right out of your head.
That little vodka was slippery as an oyster. When the skinny people want what the fat people's got.
Wait.
When the fat people want what the some kids think their parents are cruel just because they want them to obey. Never do wrong, never do wrong, never do wrong.
Rigby, loving in the summertime. What?
Also, I'm not going to put air quotes every time I say good or bad music. The Shaggs are bad, technically, but I love them unironically. Philosophy of the world, what they are known for, unironically, I just hear it and I'm just like, It's a really, really enjoyable listen. But if somebody said it's awful, I'd be like, yeah, I see what you mean. If you said the guitar was like 14 pocket combs being run through a moose's dorsal, with drums that sounded like a peg leg stumbling through a field of bald uniroyals, which is a type of tire, I had to look that up, I'd be like, it's a little specific, but sure. And that's from a positive review. But I don't know, isn't like punk or metal or something brutal, gory, grimy,
cavernous,
maybe like cartoon stink lines coming off of it? I don't know. Good and bad don't exist. This band is bad conventionally, but they are unironically fantastic to many people. The Shaggs are hailed as a shining beacon of creativity by the likes of Frank Zappa, Kurt Cobain, Matt Groening, Jonathan Richman, NRBQ, Bonnie Raitt, Nutrimilk Hotel, Deerhoof, and many others. While their biggest inspiration supposedly is Herman's Hermits, I mean, I can kind of hear that. I would recommend the Shaggs to people who like Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, the Butthole Surfers, the Germs, metal, I guess.
Oh, or the Rock Cats. They actually sound a lot like the Rock Cats.
It's like ugly and beautiful, kitschy and artsy, perfectly imperfect. Basically everything Lulu tried to be. In the liner notes of their debut LP, the father of the Shaggs describes the band as follows. The Shaggs are real, pure, unaffected by outside influence. Perhaps only the Shaggs do what others would like to do, and that is perform only what they believe in, what they feel, not what others think the Shaggs should feel. The Shaggs love you and love to perform for you. They will not change their music or style to meet the whims of a frustrated world. You should appreciate this because you know they are pure. What more can you ask? Betty, Helen, and Dorothy Wiggin are the Shaggs. They are sisters and members of a large family where mutual respect and love for each other is at an unbelievable high. They study and practice together, encouraged and helped by those around them, in an atmosphere which has encouraged them to develop their music unaffected by outside influence. They are happy people and love what they are doing. They do it because they love it. While much of that is more or less how music journalists would describe the Shaggs to this day, pretty much all of it, barring the basic biographical info, is a lie to manipulate both the band and the audience. It's hard to think of a band less pure or real or unaffected by outside influence than the Shaggs. Okay, now that that's out of the way, time to get into the band's lore. And oh boy, does this band have a lot of lore. Our story begins with a prophecy. Austin Wiggin Jr. went to a psychic, who was also his mom. Then Meemaw Shaggy caressed the creases of his palm, and yea, it was written to the wrinkle of his palm, so shall it be decreed, and as it was decreed, so shall it be. It was prophesied that he shall wed a woman with the hair of strawberry blonde. And lo, this strawberry mama would birth him daughters who would play in a band that would become known far and wide, and they would have 2 sons which Grandmama Shag would not live to see. And get this, all that stuff happened. But the last thing to happen was for the band to become famous. And he wanted that sweet, sweet Jackson 5 money, so he made sure that part came true. He got them singing lessons. He got them music lessons. Wait, really? Anyway, the band existed. Nobody could dispute that. They were a band. Some of the other members of the Wiggin family would join on occasion, but the big 3 were Helen on drums, Betty on vocals and rhythm guitar, and the singer, songwriter, lead guitarist, and at this point, spokeswoman of the Shaggs, Dot Wiggin. All right, so Keep Austin Weird Wiggin was a bit of a tyrant, like Murray Wilson or Joe Jackson, but without a background in music or even the ability to impart a love of songwriting and music in his kids, the girls did not want to be in a band. But he decided that the girls would study music rather intensely, get lessons, be homeschooled, and get better at music. Fremont, New Hampshire did not have a high school, so busing them would take even more time out of their day, which he felt should go to his vision, which was the Shaggs. They gave them the name the Shaggs like the haircut or the dog. It's actually a pretty cool name. Sweet, short, sounds cool, 2 G's for search engine optimization. You know what kind of music they are trying to play without even listening to them because their name is the Shaggs. But that's the problem. What music they are trying to play. Their oft-cited influences include Dino, Desi and Billy, Ricky Nelson, and especially Herman's Hermits. All great acts, surfy, poppy, very commercially friendly rock of the 60s. And this is one of the reasons the Shaggs hit so hard for me. I love the bubblegum 60s crap and weird, freaky pop culture ephemera. And this is the sound of struggling to fit in back then. The Shaggs just alter my feelings more than most bands that try to be weird. I mean, like, Deerhoof did a cover trying to be weird, and it's fucking Deerhoof. And it's less weird than what the Shaggs did effortlessly.
Please come to me, confirm now to me. Won't you come home, Papa?
It's often said, possibly apocryphally, that Frank Zappa said the Shaggs are better than the Beatles. I don't agree, but the Shaggs are better than Frank Zappa or like Revolution Number 9 or whatever. So where would these hermits aspiring to be Herman's Hermits be playing? In 1968, the girls finally made their big debut at a talent show in Exeter, a small town in New Hampshire, just outside their smaller town of Fremont. They were booed and pelted with trash. While playing songs they didn't even want to play for someone else's dream. The songs really did reflect their feelings, though, and singing about your feelings in public is incredibly vulnerable, even for those confident in their craft and who actually choose to perform it. Being a teenager and just existing is humiliating, let alone contorting yourself to the shape of someone else's rigid fantasy, receiving a barrage of criticism from audiences in Austin alike, but he considers his criticism constructive. The trash pelting, not so much. He had no place for the trash pelting, understandably, so he took the mic and scolded the audience. The whole trash thing only happened once, even though it's usually talked about like it happened on the regular. One demonstration that you punks better straighten up and fly right, and just like that, bam, the bullying was done a little bit less publicly from then on. Eventually, the Shaggs netted a 2-year residency gig at the Fremont Town Hall. Austin mandated their weekly performances Saturdays, and that they scrub the scuffs off the dance floor every Sunday. With the floors cleaned by the girls, the community center would allow the dances to continue. Dances like these were rowdy, after all. They got a reputation for being trouble. Kids' parents really didn't want them going to see the Shaggs. Bullying, fights would break out, and cigarettes would be smoked, and naturally they would have audiences of 40 or 50 teens each week. Most footage of these dances became lost media when a burglar plundered a chest that was actually full of home movies from the Wiggin family home. There is, however, 15 minutes of footage and 2 minutes of audio known to exist currently that we can play over one another. Here's their cover of Gimme Dat Ding. I would tear up that dance floor. On originals, they'd actually speed up beyond a record tempo to allow folks to do the polka to it. Drummer Helen met a fellow named Henry at one of these dances and eventually married him in secret, but continued to live at home with her father. Given that Helen was the oldest, she would have been in her early 20s when she was afraid to admit to her father that she'd been dating. Gives you an idea of the kind of authoritarian grip that he had. He was highly critical of the Shaggs, making them rehearse day in and day out, tearing apart each mistake after every Saturday dance. It's unclear what mistakes he thought there to be, because he also believed that good quality guitars were tuned once when you bought them and should never be adjusted again. Set 'em and forget 'em. Don't go touching the knobs up top. He was also insistent on getting the girls while they're hot, recording them immediately, despite the advice of the audio engineer at Fleetwood Studios in Revere, Massachusetts. Austin was the only one in the room, really, who thought that they should be recording, including the band. But he had his life savings ready to spend, or invest, as he would see it. The studio workers tried to talk Austin into waiting till the girls knew how to play, or at least let them tune up their guitars for them, but no dice. They were tuned when they bought them, and they were the finest guitars, and they were guaranteed. They plugged both guitars into one amp because there was two inputs. Why not? So the engineers couldn't mix two guitars separately, but there wasn't really much they could do to make this record sound conventional anyway. They tried having someone at the studio sit in on drums and redo the track that Helen had laid down so that the family wouldn't completely waste their life savings, but it was no use. The band's tempo shifted so much that they couldn't play over it, and they just left it as is. Austin, who called himself the proprietor of the Shaggs, hilarious title, would occasionally stop the song and tell everyone to take it from the top. The engineers were baffled. If every note was wrong, how did they make a mistake? My sentiments exactly. They held it together, both the band and the engineers, enough for the album to be recorded. 1,000 copies were printed, 900 disappeared mysteriously with the guy from the studio who probably just threw them in a dumpster, and the remaining records became incredibly sought after. I think if a friend busted out a first pressing of the Shaggs, my eyes would melt like the Ark of the Covenant. Truly too pure for this world. Philosophy of the World failed to make a splash with DJs because unless you were Dr. Demento or Beyond Oddville or something, what are you going to do with these songs, you know? Play between the Osmonds and the Monkees? No. At best, it was a vinyl clay pigeon or fodder for a decorative craft bowl. You know, it wasn't music, it was trash. It's downright creepy. It's the sound of the girls cramming themselves into a mold that they don't even remotely fit. It's the soundtrack to Stockholm Syndrome. It's pop hits through a funhouse mirror. It's the Flying Dutchman torturing Annette Funicello. It's a dark incantation that sends even the most straight edge among us directly down a K-hole. Actually, that sounds pretty cool. Let's give it a listen.
And the girls with long hair want short hair.
So that was something. Obviously, the sound, it's kind of weird. I don't know enough about music theory to tell you that they're actually doing some very deep microtonal genius with brilliant use of polyrhythms, but I think the lyrics don't get enough attention. I've always pictured the dad handing them these lyrics in a reverse Big Eyes situation, but Dot's adult writing style is so similar that it definitely was her, like distinctly her. Now that poses a different problem, which is she must have internalized the proprietor's worldview so much that when she goes to sing a song, it's about how you should always listen to your parents, or in the case of the title track, how it's normal for people to be deeply unhappy with their situation. Don't complain. If you had a good situation, you wouldn't like that either. If she was allowed to live a normal life, she would wish her dad forced her into a terrible band. No one's happy. Don't worry about being happy. Okay, so it's just the grass is greener on the other side, sure. But it's very dark if you consider where she's probably getting that value from. And sometimes the grass really is greener on the other side. She could write about anything in the whole world. She could be singing about love or something, or surfing. Surfing is pretty cool. Instead, she's just like, even if my life was different, I would be unhappy. This is fine. Everything's fine. I think about the line, the rich people want what the poor people got, and the poor people want what the rich people got. All the damn time.
That's gonna take a lot of panhandling to...
I'm actually rich. I have a lot of dollars.
Wait, you're rich?
Yeah, I have a ton of money.
I mean, I'm rich too.
We need to look really nice for the occasion, and that means looking like the bourgeoisie. Trying to look fancy, huh? Like you think you're better than me? So, we fetishize wealth. Which brings us back to Stockholm Syndrome. And that subject is all over this record. Like the next song is about how the world is scary and the teens driving around with their friends are wrong. They should stay at their parents' house.
I learned my lesson, never do wrong, never do wrong, never do wrong.
Which raises the question, who are parents?
I want them to obey certain rules.
Parents are the ones who really care. Parents are the ones who are always there. And if you think your parents are cruel, the situation is to just ignore it and just do what they say. Even if their dad was a good dad, that's not a healthy attitude to have. They were a rock band of young adults in 1969. I'm not saying they should have been dropping doses at the Woodstock mud pit or something, but like, for a song like this to exist, Austin had to be walking around like he's Kim Jong-un. What is this? Rebelling against your parents is a natural and necessary part of healthy development. Ideally, I think, your parents should be a bit wrong. If your parents are totally chill, what are you gonna do? Become Mandark?
No more tofu! No more flowers!
My pal foot, always likes to roam. My pal foot, now he has no home.
Even My Pal Foot is about how the cat should not have gone outside. He should have listened to his authority figures. Little fun fact, Austin used to tell the girls this folk tale of 3 rabbits named Foot, and Foot. It's quite possible that he got this from country musician Mel Tillis, who would tell this story on stage as a way to joke about his stutter and kind of like reclaim it, you know.
Foot. So Foot, he went and he found Foot. He said, Foot.
The girls liked the story, so they named their cat Foot. And Foot likes to roam, but unlike the song, when he gets lost, they do not find him. She was kind of rewriting reality so that it had a happy ending, and that's nice.
When I walk my pets, no one live, and I take my companion, it never has rest.
Chances are, if you like music enough that you like the Shaggs, you felt all alone aside from your CD collection at some point. We were all born into some kind of weird authoritarian culture. I mean, the Shaggs is like an extreme version of the stuff that many people find relatable. At least many music nerds, I guess. Companion has always reminded me of like Dance Music by the Mountain Goats or Life Form by Major Organ and the Adding Machine.
I'm so happy when you're near, I'm so sad when you're away.
Shouldn't you be singing about how, like, you almost died, or your cat almost died, or you should give up on happiness and obey the dear leader? Love? That's what we're going with? Love?
The ghost will spook, the spooks will scare. Why even Dracula will be there.
Oh man, that's like the best part.
I could have perhaps seen this becoming a novelty Halloween hit, but they were about a decade after those types of hits dried up. It went over quite well when they would perform at nursing homes, and I could see radio audiences with little context thinking they were precocious teeny boppers making a few mistakes, rather than jumping to the assumption that they were young adults without musical ambition being forced to play against their will. They actually almost had a hit in a way. So this guy, Harry Palmer,
I hardly know her, but I'd like to.
this guy, Harry Palmer, came out to scout them and maybe get them on The Tonight Show. He saw all these kids dancing at one of these Saturday night dances in a clumsy, arrhythmatic, Night of the Living Dead kind of way. He knew this would be a big hit in a certain way, but as he drove home in the fog, thinking about how the girls would react, he just couldn't go through with it. The talk show circuit would have ate it up and ate them alive. They weren't like Tiny Tim or something who would gladly go and be ridiculed. Tiny Tim was more famous than people who mostly know him from SpongeBob might assume, especially his appearances on Johnny Carson, the same year and show the girls would have been on. Go and ask your Mima who Tiny Tim is, and she'll be like, "Why, I saw him marry a teenager live on the Johnny Carson program." It's a good thing the Shaggs fame crept up slowly the way that it did. Dot seems to view the fame and the fans as some kind of consolation prize.
Made us realize that there were a lot of fans out there that liked us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it made up for us. They were pretty mean and cruel.
Yeah, from what I read, it was terrible.
But life is, so.
Falling up inside, then for some reason I just got to cry.
Probably the best title for anything ever. It's another one of these weird philosophical grasping songs about how strange it is to be anything at all. Try to think of something gay. Why do I feel the way I feel? You can't say something that funny in a song this sad.
He's a sad boy, he's a bad boy.
The correct way to listen to this song is to sing it to a dog.
He's a sad boy, he's a bad boy, he's a disgrace, he never wins the race. Tell me, what should I do? Yeah.
At some point in the mid-70s, a Boston radio station began playing cuts from the Shaggs, and their legend began its slow spread. At the time, it was a baffling legend of music that somehow had people attached to it. But for Fremont, it was people that somehow have music attached to them. And even then, it was fodder for gossip. There were whispers that Austin was inappropriately intimate with the girls. When asked about it, Betty said that that wasn't true. However, Helen said on one occasion that he was with her. So perhaps Betty would have just not known about it. At some point, Helen worked up the nerve to confess something, that she, a 28-year-old woman, had gotten married. The ever-possessive Austin found this scandalous and unacceptable. So he got his shotgun with the intent to find and kill his son-in-law. The police got involved and got everyone in the same place. And since Austin was making Helen choose him and the band over her husband, the cops pointed out that she had a choice. At what degree of coercion and freedom is a choice legitimately a choice is a different conversation, but Helen actually did choose freedom. She was 28 gosh darn years old and finally felt free enough to choose her husband over her father. It took Austin months to speak to her again. Not long after this strange family reunion, on August 4th, 1975, Austen finally gave the girls approval on their magnum opus, Philosophy of the World. According to him, they had finally played it correctly. The song they had rehearsed most, and that he had criticized most, was finally perfect. Later that day, he had a massive heart attack and died. Without the family patriarch, the women ran to start their actual lives, have families, happy homes, their hopes and dreams. Though Austen still looms large over every part of the story, even after he's gone. When the Wiggin family home was sold off, the new resident felt a dark presence. He was convinced that Austen was haunting the house, so he built a bigger, nicer house further back on the property and donated the home to the Fremont Fire Department for practice putting out fires. By setting and extinguishing a series of controlled burns in the house and engulfing the spirit of Austen in flames. Nearly a decade later, the band NRBQ approached the group inquiring about any unreleased material that might be floating around. And in 1982, the second Shaggs album was released, Shaggs' Own Thing, consisting of the mid-70s recordings from when Austen was still alive. This album often gets glossed over because it isn't as bizarre or unnerving, mostly. The band had reached a level of technical skill that the album is more relaxing than anything. Pitchfork called it amateurish bubblegum country, which explains why I like it so much. The album is very underrated. Tracks like You're Something Special to Me and Paper Roses are gorgeous. I think Betty's song Painful Memories is a standout. While seemingly a breakup tune, it mirrors the way that she talks about her memories of the band.
Even though it's painful, I'll always cherish these sweet memories.
By the late 90s, the Shaggs were the toast of many famous musicians, but still the reissue of Philosophy of the World sold poorly. Dot and Betty took a break from their day jobs to play the Bowery Ballroom, though, reuniting the Shaggs with a 4-song opening for the NRBQ 30th anniversary show. The sisters were shocked that there were fans of the Shaggs, people asking for autographs from them, and they didn't even think their music was good, but they began to realize that others out there did. Around this time, Susan Orlean of The New Yorker did the first major write-up of the Shaggs. Tom Cruise and Paula Wagner immediately optioned the movie rights for the article. As far as I can tell, nothing happened with that, but in 2018, Ken Kwapis and Elsie Fisher did cast for a musical film, which has yet to be made. 2001 brought us Better Than the Beatles, a tribute to the Shaggs. The album featured folks like Thinking Fellers, Local Union 282, Ida, R. Stevie Moore, and Deerhoof, but perhaps most fittingly, Danielson Famia. Danielson shares many things in common with the Shaggs and other similar artists. Moving on to more serious matters, sadly, in 2006, Helen passed away. She may be remembered by music nerds as the drummer of the Shaggs, but she was certainly much more than that to her friends and family, and I'm sure she is sorely missed and greatly cherished. May she rest in peace.
You're something special to me. 2, 3, 4.
A few years later, 2011 saw the run of an off-Broadway play, The Shaggs, Philosophy of the World.
How can we just stop going to school? My dad knows what he's doing.
It's gonna make us money.
What if we don't want to practice anymore?
That's what I raised you to do.
While this play wasn't documented in full, to my knowledge, as a video, you can hear the full album and pretty much glean what the play would have been like by that. Co-writer Gunnar Madsen had some interesting words of wisdom. I have tapes of myself starting out. I think any musician has. They should never be released. A reminder that we've all been the Shaggs at one point. I think all artists struggle with the balance between following the rules of technique to better realize a vision and allowing something more spontaneous to flow forth. Out of context, the Shaggs are like a vicarious outlet for this desire, to do the wrong thing, to break free, to break the rules. But in context, they were prisoners. In 2012, Shag Mania was nearly in full effect, with original pressings of Philosophy going for as high as $10,000. The time was right for a career retrospective. Jesse Krakow got a bunch of his friends together to take turns covering and dancing to the entire Shaggs catalog.
I'm sneaking out with my girl. I think she was your girl. And doing it? Yeah, doing it. Doing what? Hugging and kissing her on a Saturday night in a bright moonlight. Doing it. I did it.
The event raised money for the Town Hall and Fremont Historical Society, celebrated Jesse's birthday, and most crucially, there was a Q&A with the guests of honor, Dot, Betty, and Rachel, the fourth Beatle. So there we have it, a fun, lighthearted career retrospective for a legendary band, the Shaggs, with greater autonomy, finally showered with praise instead of trash. A fine bow to wrap everything up, right?
Wrong!
If this was a movie, that might be where we'd stop, but the rest of the story is actually just as interesting. The following day, the Shaggs and all the musicians who paid tribute to them had a bit of an after party. Many people had traveled to be there, so they wanted to make the most out of everybody gathered together around the common interests of celebrating the Shaggs and celebrating the Shaggs. Dot mentioned during the Q&A that she had some unreleased Shaggs songs from the 70s written, but not recorded. So Jesse offered to help her bring those songs back to life. By the following year, we see the release of Ready, Set, Go by the Dot Wiggin Band. Dot has mentioned she hasn't fully put away writing, so it's not clear to me which of these songs are 70s cuts and which are newer. But regardless, the originals and covers were selected by Dot in her seemingly and hopefully content, mature age. I can't help but notice that these songs are all much happier. A little sadness mixed in, like life is, but it is mostly a very happy album. So many of these songs have this feeling of a wise old woman reflecting on her life and gently smiling over a cup of coffee. I may be projecting my hopes onto this record, but there's this contentment in her voice that's just very pleasant. She just presents her feelings honestly, not a whole lot of dressing them up. She's just like, this is how I feel, and that's important, which it is. And that comes through in the music. Sonically, I get big Adam Green vibes, but lyrically it reminds me of something Kimya Dawson would write. Much of this is just so saccharine and warm-hearted, like Love at First Sight, which is adorable. Speed Limit 2 is kinda nutty with it.
They must obey the law. Perhaps someday soon they'll come to their senses.
That's pretty cool. Like many of their songs, it is the cautionary tale about obeying authority. Perhaps the one song most touting freedom is Banana Bike.
There's a destination, sometimes no one knows. Disappears for days on end.
This song was written around Y2K. Perhaps that accounts for the happy tonal shift, or perhaps it just needs the appropriate context. Helen apparently would go for long rides on her bike and go missing for days. And Dot wrote this song inspired by those events. Dot recounted, showing her the lyrics, as follows. Are you making fun of me, Dot? And I go, no, Helen, I'm just telling you how it was going through that. And she goes, okay.
Helen and her banana bike. We love you so.
Dot Wiggin Band did a run of shows opening for Neutral Milk Hotel in 2015. I imagine Dot learned of Neutral Milk Hotel by being booked with them, which is wild to me. They don't seem like a band she'd know. It may not have made sense to Dot that she was touring with them, but to me, the bands are very analogous and complementary. They both have brief but highly influential discographies, have grown more popular over time after returning to normal life, and they've both been relatively private. Surely they were both at the top of many people's lists of bands we'd love to see reunite, but probably never will. Until they did. Well, I mean, kind of. The Dot Wiggin Band is not the Shaggs. Even though just the name would boost the sales exponentially, I'm sure. Or maybe it wouldn't. I think most of that tour sold out on the headliner alone. Besides the point. You can't be the Shaggs on purpose, even if you are the Shaggs. The Dot Wiggin Band isn't really unnerving or avant-garde. They're fun, lighthearted indie rock. So that's that. They aren't the Shaggs. Except for that one time they were the Shaggs. With the addition of Betty, of course, and a few folks from the Jesse Krakow birthday party, namely Jesse himself, Laura Cromwell, and another interesting player in all of this, Brittany Andrew. She's a music psychology researcher and jazz pianist. En Amigo Reciprocite is a really swinging jazz album with some titles in Esperanto, Por miai Esperantai amikoi. Brittany also made a very fun Shaggs-themed workout video.
But sometimes I think we are completely insane. If we could see each other more, it wouldn't be so bad.
And she had a short-lived jazz-themed Shaggs cover band, the Swingin' Wiggins.
Please, still, my cutie, my cutie.
Okay, back to the main story. The Shaggs reunion performance is good, better in the studio I think, but it got rave reviews. Critics called it unsettling, beautiful, and eerie. A lot of fan reception was astonishment that they could play it like the record. Dot seemed to kind of prefer they play it better than the record, but she noted that everybody seemed to like it the way it was. Many people, though, were conflicted because it's the Shaggs. I mean, what even are the Shaggs? To some people, they're a joke. To others, a symbol of the tension between authoritarian pressure and freedom. Some people find catharsis in returning to trauma. And the Shaggs become this vessel for other people's feelings yet again. I mean, Betty, for example, was there for the money. She once quipped she liked seeing others play the Shaggs song so she doesn't have to. Revering the Shaggs led to a series of economic pressures that put her on stage when she wasn't exactly comfortable with it. It's a choice she made to perform, but again we see the swooping of coercive forces nudging her onto the stage. Joe Mosian, part of RCA Victor, who reissued the Shaggs philosophy record, postulated that people are a little afraid of having the Shaggs in their record collection. Buy the Shaggs from RCA Victor.
Are you chicken?
Well, I understand the apprehension. Really, I do. I don't think we would be doing them any favors by ignoring songs that are so good. I think conversation about the Shaggs should remember first and foremost that they have feelings. I've agonized a lot over this video, trying to make sure that I am respectful to the Shaggs in this analysis. So I'd like to state that everything I say is my opinion, my interpretation. It's hard to appreciate art without trying to figure out what it means, because I think that is the funnest part, personally. But then it comes at the cost of possibly putting words into the mouth of people who might be offended by that. Am I appreciating the Shaggs in a way that they would appreciate? I don't know. I'm trying to be respectful. I'm trying to consider how they feel. But mostly, I kind of just hope they won't see this because that would be weird. The Shaggs will probably never have another reunion. In fact, I hope they don't. I hope the Shaggs never happens again at all. But with the barrier to entry for recording something lowered so much, I'm sure there are at least a few TikTok dancers or family vloggers who could be compared to the Shaggs. The Shaggs never made any serious money back then, but I firmly believe if the internet existed, they would have, which wouldn't be a good thing. In the digital age of rage bait and cringe content monetization, everything's come full circle. Some parents would and do gladly humiliate their kids to content farm. The Shaggs are a cautionary tale that only turned out relatively well because of a lack of more immediate success and the resilience of the family members themselves. The world wasn't ready for the Shaggs in 1969. I don't even think we're ready for them now. But in the age of advanced spectacle, of the global village, and the content machine, they raise questions of consent, fame, parasocial relationships. Tragically, it is yesterday once more.
It can really make me cry just like before. It's yesterday once more.
In just the time it took to make this video, multiple pieces of legislation were passed to protect the kid influencers in the shoes of the Shaggs today. And hopefully more and more wide-ranging bills are pushed forward in the near future. So please support any legislation like that when it comes to your jurisdiction. And in the meantime, I think we could all agree here, but just to wrap it up as neatly as I can, cringe is cringe. Don't humiliate people. Don't normalize cruelty. And please be respectful of other people's feelings. Be mindful of economic and interpersonal pressures acting on the people behind your screen, especially youth. Just be kind, you know? Thanks for watching. I opened a Patreon and a Ko-fi beats to study/relax to. Anyone who wants to support me monetarily there will get a shout out in this part of my video essays. And anyone who wants to support me other ways can like, subscribe, comment below, or share this video with a friend, all of which would help me out immensely and don't cost you a dime. My sincerest thank yous to anyone who watched this.
You don't